Good evening. Namaste, everybody. Namaskaram. Thank you for joining us. The Indian Jewish Heritage Center, together with the Cochin Heritage Center in Nevatim, are happy to host today to our 73rd talk in our Heritage on Zoom program. For today's talk, we are very happy to host the ethnocologist, musicologist, and performer, Dr. Sara Manasseh. Sara was born in Bombay to her parents, Rachel and Albert, sister to Yaakov. She is a direct descendant of David Sassoon, who fled persecution in Baghdad, arriving to Mumbai in 1832. In 1966, the family moved to London. Dr. Sara is the founding director of the ensemble Rivers of Babylon in London, performing religious and secular songs in the Iraqi Jewish tradition, Middle Eastern instrumentals, and vintage Bollywood songs. Her PhD dissertation, based on fieldwork in Ramat Gan, Israel, addressed Iraqi women, Jewish women, and secular songs. She was appointed senior lecturer in music at the Kingston University in Surrey. She has lectured in Jewish music at the School of Oriental and African Studies, and in her publications, one of them includes the book Shabahot, Songs and Praises in the Babylonian Jewish Tradition from Baghdad to Mumbai and London. She lives in London with her husband David. Sara, please, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Avner, for the introduction and for inviting me to speak for the IJHC and for all the amazing Zoom presentations that you've been putting on during the pandemic. Thank you too, Avner, for suggesting today's topic of growing up in Bombay, which is today's Mumbai, and of speaking of my father, Albert Manasseh's role in setting up the youth organization Habonim in India. I've organized this presentation to start with a few scenes in Bombay of my family, the community in which I grew up, some school days, and the youth organization Habonim. In fact, these are not separate categories, and they do overlap with each other. Many people who appear in this presentation are no longer with us. We remember their outstanding service to the community and their love and dedication in making us the people we are today. May their memory be blessed. Thank you all for being here. I'll attempt to share the screen now, and hopefully it will work. Okay. So my presentation is called Growing Up in Bombay with the Colors of the Indian Flag. And the subtitles are Habonim Strong Builders, Rock Around the Clock, and more. So it's called Bombay Beautiful. We always knew that, but we didn't actually know why it was so beautiful. But since we go back now and then, we find out it really is very beautiful. Bombay Beautiful, Bombay Meri Jaan, Bombay My Life. Jara hat ke, jara bach ke, ye hai Bombay Meri Jaan. In the words of Muhammad Rafi, who sang it in the film CID, Johnny Walker. So Bombay, called nowadays Mumbai, and was also called Urbs Prima in Indus, the first city of India. So people from Calcutta, if you think that yours is the first city because you were the first capital of India, forget it. It's Bombay, it's Mumbai. It's also in the Cathedral Boys' School song. Now today in the Cathedral School song, which I went to, Prima in Indus, gateway of India, door of the east with its face to the west. And here you see the gateway of India at Apolobanda, which is on the sea, looking out onto the Arabian Sea. And many notables have come through that gateway into India, into Bombay. Many people have had to leave that way as well. I do remember in the 1960s that Queen Elizabeth II and Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, came through that gateway, and myself with my mother and father and brother were on the street, and as they passed, we waved to them, and they waved back, and they were in an open car. I also especially remember that when I was a teenager with my Habonim friends, in those days, you could just walk into the Gateway of India. You can't any longer. We would go there and we danced the hora and danced other Israeli folk dances, and that was really beautiful. Things have changed now. Opposite the Gateway of India is the Taj Hotel, the Taj Mahal Hotel. And that also faces the Arabian Sea. I remember also that my mother once took us there to hear Arthur Rubinstein giving a piano recital. It was a magnificent piano recital. And I remember that he ended with one of Chopin's waltzes, the Grande Valse Brillante in E-flat major. And since I've been studying that one, I was especially happy. There's plenty more to talk about the Taj Hotel, but that's enough for now. So it faces east, and that's why you can see the sunrise every morning at Apollo Bandar by the Taj Hotel and by the Gateway of India. Really a wonderful sight and a lovely walk to have. So this is again the Gateway of India, and the motor launch is ready for their day's work to take you for a cruise around the harbour or further out to Elephanta Caves, to Elephanta Island and the caves over there. I guess I was a babe in arms at this time, so I don't remember the British troops leaving India, but this was also the scene, and it's quite amazing to see so many people in rank and file over there, and the Gateway of India looking absolutely splendid on the top picture. And on the right, you see, again, the Taj Mahal Hotel, and below we have the Greens Hotel that used to be there. It's now been demolished, and it's now the new wing of the Taj Hotel. So here's a map of India. You can see that Bombay is on the western coast, looking out to the west, and around it are a few of the places that we used to go to on holiday, to Pune, to Matharan, to Panchgani, Lonavala, Mahabaleshwar. And my mother would also take us on holidays up north, so we went to Agra and Delhi and Simla in the winter, in the snow, and also to Darjeeling. You see Mount Everest from these places. Moving to the map on the right, so this is the map of Bombay, and I grew up in the area that is the fort and the Colaba, this area. The Iraqi Jewish community was lived in two areas. One was the fort and Colaba, and the other was Baikala. And in those days, to me, Baikala seemed miles and miles away. And I think it did take a half an hour to get there. And nowadays there's a flyover and you get there in 5 minutes from Victoria Terminus station. So Bombay is surrounded by the sea, and you can be at the Apollo Bandar to watch the sunrise and get to then Marine Drive and Cuff Parade to see the sunset, which is very beautiful. And here is Marine Drive. And at night, all the street lights will be lit up, and it's known then as the Queen's Necklace because it looks very beautiful. Moving in just slightly, moving from Marine Drive, we get to the Oval, which has got the Rajabai Clock Tower and the University Library as well. And the entrance is actually from the base of the clock tower up the stairs to the first floor, and this very beautiful window that you see. And moving further inwards, we get to the David Sassoon Library. My mother, Rachel Manasseh, happened to be there in 1994 when she was researching material for her book. And she was asked by the David Sassoon Library to be the chief guest because she was a descendant, they said, of David Sassoon. She did say that she was not a descendant, it was her late husband who was the descendant. However, they insisted, and she was chief guest. And Moses Taltun, who was from the Sassoon Trust, he was also a special guest. And they're standing by the statue of David Sassoon, who was garlanded for the occasion. If we move on north now slightly, we get to Flora Fountain, known as Fountain, and today known as Hutatma Chowk. And at one point of Flora Fountain, moving further a bit north, you have this amazing oriental buildings which faces Flora Fountain. So there were two roads here on the left and the right. If you take the one to the right, you would go down the road, and on the right-hand side, soon there would be the Parsi Fire Temple, and on the left-hand side, one of the turnings would take you to the Cathedral and John Connon Girls High School, and the next turning would take you to the Cathedral and John Connon Boys High School. I really spent my life at that school, because if you went on the left, you would come to the Cathedral and John Connon Kindergarten and Junior School, which is where I started at the age of 4. Situated outside our school, the John Connon KG School was the most beautiful statue, and here it is, but no longer in situ. I've called this one "How Are the Mighty Fallen?" So outside our school, junior school, was this very beautiful statue of Queen Victoria with this canopy, all in marble. At that time, we had already had Indian independence, and her nose had been cut off. However, she still looked quite magnificent, and so did the canopy. She's now been demoted. She's no longer in that place. She's lost her canopy. They've cleaned her up, and she's in the outdoor gallery of the East Garden at the Dr. Bhauldaji Lad Museum, which was formerly the Victoria and Albert Museum in Baikala. A similar fate has befallen Edward, Prince of Wales, and this was a statue presented by Sir Albert Sassoon. In the lower picture, you see him as he was outside the David Sassoon Library on a most marvelous plinth with beautiful plaques, including the Sassoon family presenting him. But now he too has been moved from that prestigious position. The area was called Kala Ghora, which means black horse. The area is still called Kala Ghora, but this particular black horse has been moved on. And he now is on ground level outside the zoo of Victoria Gardens, adjacent to the same museum. This is inside the museum, the Dr. Bhauldaji Lad Museum, originally the V&A Victoria and Albert Museum. Here you see Albert, Prince Consort, a fantastic statue presented by David Sassoon to the museum. And the plaque at the bottom is in English and in Hebrew and in Hindi. In front of the statue, you see a bust of David Sassoon. And if you were to go behind the statue, you would see another bust, and that is of Queen Victoria. In the old days, Queen Victoria and David Sassoon were both in front of the statue, but she's been demoted yet again and sent to the back of the statue. However, it is an absolutely beautiful museum. Other scenes in Bombay, we have beautiful fruit and vegetable markets, food markets, and this one was called Crawford Market in my time, now called the Mahatma Jyotibai Phule Market. I often came here with my grandmother. As you can see on the right, it's a covered market, and there would be coolies sitting outside on the ground with their very, very large circular baskets, and you would choose your coolie, and he would then follow you around to all the different stalls, and you would then buy what you wanted, put it in his basket. And here are some more images inside the market. You can see all the beautiful fruits and vegetables so colorfully and artistically displayed. Another market is the Colaba Bazaar. This one was nearer my house. So I should tell you, when we went home from Crawford Market, my grandmother and I would go back in a taxi or in the car, and the coolie with all his stuff would have it on his head and would run back home at a trot. This always seemed to me as being very, very unfair, but he seemed to be happy enough, and he was earning his day's keep. Colaba Bazaar was nearer where we lived. I don't think I actually went there when I grew up, but I have visited quite often since. But our cook would come here every day. He would first confer with my mother as to what the day's menu would be, and then he would come and buy the stuff, bring it back, give us hisab, give us account, and we would be set up for the day and have some delicious food. So these are some more scenes of Colaba Bazaar, where you can have your mattresses fluffed up as well, or get some pajamas made if you like at the machinists. We used to also have darzis coming to our house, tailors who would make us the most amazing creations. Coming out of Colaba Bazaar and going towards Apollo Banda and the Gateway of India, you have various vendors, and here you have the Chanawala, who sells you peanuts and gram and sew and mung dal, all of which you can mix with lemon and onions and chili powder if you like. And because he has a cold brazier here, everything is warm and fresh. And he would put it in these paper cones, and off you would go for your walk and enjoy a snack. Other snacks, of course, are the coconut straw, which is wonderful in the heat, to drink coconut water, and then he would scrape out the inside, whether it's the patla malai or the cobra, which is the thicker one, and you would be set up for lunch. That would be your meal. If you happened to go to a restaurant and came out, you would get the panwala, who would spread some spices and syrup, sweet syrup, or whatever you chose into a leaf, and fold the leaf up for you, and you would then eat that, and your mouth would be well freshened. Cows are ubiquitous in Mumbai, and they don't harm anyone and no one harms them. They're a wonderful sight. And also I love seeing the garlands that they make up. You can see them working inside the shop, and the white jasmine, the mogra, which smells so beautiful and women often have in their hair. Talking about family life, as you said, my father's was a direct descendant of David Sassoon, who came from Baghdad to Basra to Bushehr and then to Bombay. He always wore a Middle Eastern dress. He spoke Judeo-Arabic, he spoke Hindustani, he spoke Hebrew, but he never spoke English. Here he is with his sons. He had quite a large family. The first is Abdullah or Albert, standing next to him, and then Elias or Eliyahu, and then his other son, a younger son, Sassoon, David Sassoon, often also called S.D. Sassoon. He was the first to wear Western dress, and a few months after this photograph, he went to London to open the firm there for the Sassoons. Below, you see Aziza. Aziza is Albert's daughter, and this is the occasion of her marriage to Ezekiel Abraham Gabe in Bombay. She was born in Bombay as well. They had a number of children. Flora Sassoon was the eldest, and one of their younger daughters was Sara, my paternal grandmother. So this is a wedding invitation written in Hebrew and Judeo-Arabic for when she married my grandfather, Imnashi Yaakov Imnashi, who was from Baghdad, and his family was from Beit Imnashi's Beida, which had established the religious institution Midrash Abu Menashe in 1840, and was led by the great sage Chacham Abdallah Somech. The institution was later known as Midrash Beit Zilcha, and its students included Chacham Yosef Hayyib, known as the Ben Ish Chai, the renowned spiritual leader of Baghdad. Moving to my mother's family, the Arnis and Juddams. My grandfather, Ruben, had already come to Bombay in 1911 for business. By 1919, it was thought he should get married, and the marriage was arranged, and my grandmother Georgette came with her mother and some members of her family and of his family. They all came from Baghdad to Basra to Bombay in an English ship. Some years later, this is the same family now, my grandmother Georgette and Ruben, her husband, my grandfather, and his father, Baba Aliyah, who visiting from Baghdad to see the children. My mother, Rachel, is the eldest, and her sisters, Marcel and Violet, and Henry was the youngest at the time. Their younger brother, Edward, had not yet been born. It's very interesting that the older girls' dresses were made and embroidered in Baghdad. So moving forward, this is when my mother got married to Albert Manasseh. So Albert Manasseh and Rachel Arni, as she was then, at the Magenta Synagogue in Bombay. Chazan was Reverend Silas, and the Shamash on the right, Isaac Baruch, remember him because I will speak about him later, Yitzhak Baruch in official robes, and holding up the canopy poles on the right are my uncle Henry Arni and his younger brother Edward, who can just about be seen at the back. And this was the family portrait on the occasion of their wedding. This is my father's father, Baba Imnashi, and my other grandparents, Baba Ruben, and my grandmother Georgette, and my mother's siblings. Moving forward, we often spend time at my grandparents' house. They lived in a house called Breham Mansions on the first floor. It was a large house and it overlooked the Calabar Causeway. Directly opposite was Leopold, the renowned cafe, which unfortunately was also affected with the terrorist bombings. And here you see my mother, Rachel, her mother, Georgette, her father, Ruben. That's me, Sara, my young brother, Jacob, and my cousin, Regina, who is actually the daughter of one of my grandmother's sisters, Tafaha. We have many memories of being at my grandmother's place. My grandfather had bought a piano for my mom when she was young, so that she would learn the piano, and she played that a lot. So the piano was still in the house, and she would often play. And all of us young children, all the cousins, probably 10 or 15 of us, would gather around the piano and sing from this book, all kinds of songs like, "Oh, my neighbor Augustin, Augustin, Augustin" in German, or "My grandfather's clock was too tall for the shelf, so it stood 90 years on the floor," and all kinds of things, including Hebrew songs like "Tu bishvatigia haglai lanot." My grandmother obviously thought we were quite good, so she volunteered our services for her Jewish Women's League's tea parties. And we would be set in one of the bedrooms, and when it was time, we would all file out. My mother would play and we would sing, and then we would all file back and be treated to homemade bhajiyas and samosas and green chutney sandwiches. It was very nice, but my cousin Abe Hillel once decided that we should be paid for our services. So he then provided an invoice, presented it to my grandmother, and I think she did pay up. So that was pretty good. I also have musical memories. My brother and I would go to Melody Salon, which was not far down the road, and we liked all kinds of music, and we loved Elvis Presley, but Elvis Presley was actually banned at the time in India. We did hear, though, that an Irani shop in the house that you see opposite on the ground floor called Olympia Cafe, I think it is, Olympia Coffee House, it's still there, but they were actually selling Elvis Presley LPs. So we went off there, asked for the Elvis Presley LPs. He looked at us a bit surreptitiously, went behind under the counter and produced this wonderful LP of Elvis Presley in a gold outfit on a white background, I think it was. So we were well pleased with that. My grandmother also took me to the Strand Cinema, which was not far, when Rock Around the Clock was showing. So it was Bill Haley and his Comets, matinee at the Strand Cinema, and the atmosphere was really electric with people dancing in the aisles. I'd never seen that before. I guess I was about 10, I'm not sure. And we sat and watched, but everyone was up dancing. And probably you might like to dance when you hear the music, so don't be shy. No one's, even if we see you, do dance. And in the words of that famous song, if you don't have a partner, use a wooden chair, or just sit back, pretend you're at the Strand Cinema and enjoy the music. Hope you enjoyed it. Well, we actually lived at Marble Hall, my parents and my brother and myself, on Woodhouse Road in Calabar. Looking out of my mother's and father's bedroom window, this is the sight we would see. We looked down Fazal Road. The first turning on the right would take us to Sobani Road, which was where a friend of mine, classmate Leela, lived. And going further still, we would get to the Cuff Parade, and on the left-hand corner, my friend Rhoda would be living over there. We had many happy birthdays there. The Cuff Parade was a lovely place to be. You could watch the sunset, you have a lovely walk, sit on the green benches, eat bhel puri, pani puri, have the kulfi wala coming round, the chana wala. It was absolutely wonderful. Meet your friends. Possibly you can see at the entrance over here is a fisherwoman, a machiwali. And every day we would have a fisherwoman walk past and calling out pomfret, pomfret, which was pomfret, which was the fish that we would all love to eat. And she'd be summoned up. My mum would choose the pomfret and press the fish by the eye. And if white water oozed out, well, then it was okay. And if it was red, she would reject the fish. Again, so many memories here. My Hillel cousins lived also on Woodhouse Road, if you turn right out of here. and I would often go to them. And with my cousin Jean, we both had piano lessons on the first floor with the Athaid sisters. We were with Julia Athaid. Well, in a short while, I could play London Bridge is Falling Down, and I was pretty pleased with myself. So I told my mother, I can play London Bridge is Falling Down. I don't need any more piano lessons. That's fine. I don't want to play anything else. So I stopped. Anyway, a few years later, she got me to start again. And again, I went on Woodhouse Road to my next teacher, Mrs. Tarapowala, who lived in Wadia House. And I was with her for a number of years until my 8th grade. I do especially remember the monsoons in Bombay. We would have floods on these streets, and I would have to wade to my piano lessons almost knee deep. Honestly, the water was between the ankles and the knees. And there I would be with my books and my raincoat and my flip-flops and a towel at the ready, dry my feet and go into the piano lesson. I'm sure there are many more things I should be telling you. We had many vendors. As I said, the fisherwoman came, but also Sameha, who you see here on the left-hand side. This little woman, she was an indefatigable baker. She made the most generously sized sambusaks filled with cheese and ka'akat and date babas. And she would wake up probably at 4 o'clock in the morning and prepare the dough and the fillings, and then make the goods and then take them to be baked and put them in a large bundle on her back and walk the streets up and down the stairs of everyone's homes selling it. I honestly don't know how she did it. She was amazing. And I remember the ka'akat, which are rings of pastry. She would then thread a rope through them. So she had a large ring of pastry and put her arm through it. So the arm had all the ka'akat and the bundle on her back and go off on her way. She was amazing. I'm most grateful to Rochelle for giving me this photograph. Behind our house was the Sassoon Docks, and this is the entrance to it, and it was built by Albert Sassoon. We had family holidays, as I said, and here these were visits. This one was a visit to the north, to Agra. So here I am with my father, Albert, myself, Sarah, my brother, Jakob, and my mother, Rachel. It was very, very hot, I remember. We went up by train. And on the right, we went to Cochin and to Goa. We took a short cruise. And when we got to Cochin, we met the coders and went to the Paradesi Synagogue at Jewtown in Cochin. And that is a picture of my brother Jakob blowing the shofar. I guess at that time, little did he know, or did we know, that in some years' time, he would actually blow the shofar for his own congregation at the Midrash Ben Ish Chai, which he instituted in New York. My brother passed away about 18 months ago, and it was shortly before the Tisha B'Av, or the 9th of Av, which is the most solemn day in the Jewish calendar because it commemorates the destruction of the two temples. By coincidence, we have an audio clip of him singing at his Midrash Ben Ish Chai the opening psalm, which is Al Naharot Babel, which is by the rivers of Babylon, where we sat down and wept when we remembered Zion. So here's a short clip from that. Al Naharot Babel שם ישבנו, גם בכינו, בזוכרנו את ציון. ערבים בפוחה, תלינו כנורתנו, כי שם שאלונו שובנו דברי שיר, ותפול עלינו שמחה. שירו לנו משיר ציון. Many of our family holidays were actually nearer home. So this is Pantani, one of the hill stations, which is up from Pune. It was quite a steep drive up with lots of winding roads, and you would get music blaring out from the loudspeakers of each village as you pass, possibly In Chakadana or Mera Juta Hai Japani, whatever the famous song was at the time. But what I particularly remember is that before many of the bends, there would be a large sign that said, "Watch the next bend, lest it be your last." However, we seem to get up there and get back again. Moving on to school days, the colors I've chosen at the top are the different colors girdles that we girls used to wear. We were in green house or orange house or red house or blue house. And on the left is when we were in the standard 11, which is when most girls and boys would finish their schooling. And it was a lovely class. A lot of us are still together. We meet either on WhatsApp or meet in India. And then I've shown over here a lot of the plays that we used to put on. That seemed to be a Chinese play. And in the middle here is the Pierrot and Harlequin play. Mrs. Downey put that one on for us. The one on the right is when some of us actually went on for 2 more years and did what was called HSC, which was the equivalent of A-level, and we studied at the boys' school for that. So we had boys and girls in that particular play. This is my friend Merlene, and here she is again. When we were in London, we thought we would like to try and track down a lot of our classmates and teachers. We managed to track down Charles Velu, who was our singing teacher and choir master and incredible pianist, and put on splendid shows of Handel and Bach and all kinds of things at school. Because of time, I shall move on to the community. This is the Knesset Eliyahu Synagogue, which was built by Sir Jacob Sassoon and his brothers in memory of their father. It was the third of the 3 Sassoon synagogues in the Bombay area. This is a west-facing stained glass window, and this was always etched on my memory. We would always be looking at this when we stood up and faced west. Very beautiful. It was recently restored and won a special prize, and they tried to restore it to its original colors. I have to say that, well, my parents sat in the synagogue. My mother, my grandmother, and I sat up in the ladies' gallery on the right. My father and brother would have been here on the left, and my grandfather and my uncles by the window behind them. I do remember standing on these stairs, and Isaac Baruch, who was a shamash in the festival of Simchat Torah, the festival of rejoicing of the law, he would stand on those stairs, and all us children would stand around him. It was maybe the only time when girls were permitted to come downstairs. And he would sing, for example, Sinai, Sinai, Aye, Moshe, Mount Sinai, where is Moses? And we would all reply, Moshe, Moshe, Aye, Sinai. We would sing and clap, and he'd carry on. Sinai. And we really enjoyed all that. I also remember him for Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. He would be standing here on the table, and when it came to the final service, the gnela service, we would all have been fasting already for about 24 hours, and coming to the last hour, and he would start the service with his really encouraging voice. He would go, Eleanor Aliyah, Eleanor Aliyah, and it's saying, oh Lord, we hope that you have forgiven us. So we said it with such joy that no one felt, you felt you've come to the end of it, you've got there, and it's absolutely amazing. So we remember him with great love. This is the exterior of the renovated synagogue. Originally, it was in unpainted Porbandar stone, but for the last 20, 30, 40 years, it was painted a bright blue, and it got known as the Blue Synagogue. So the architect thought that really she should incorporate that blue so that it's still a blue synagogue. And on the right, you see the original Minton floor tiles, which are still very much a feature of the synagogue. At the entrance to the synagogue, There are 3 plaques. In the middle is a plaque to Reverend Silas, who served as Hazan for 40 years, who married my parents. On the right is a plaque to Albert Manasseh, my father, who was head and spiritual leader to the community for over 50 years. And on the left, a plaque to Moses Saltoon for his devoted services. I should say that my brother, Rabbi Yaakov Menashe, also came to Bombay very often in the last 10 years or so, and he also was spiritual leader there. This is the Magenta Synagogue in Baikala, Bombay. It's the first synagogue to have been built, and it was built by David Sassoon in 1861. The synagogue had a choir, a male choir, and they sang from about 1930s onwards, and the choir consisted of boys from the Iraqi Jewish community, from the Cochin community, from the Persian community, and from the Bnei Israel community as well. The original cupboard in the synagogue, which housed these Torah scrolls, is this one, but I guess it became too small when there were more Sifrei Torah, and here are the Sassoon Torah scrolls. This is the Ohel David Synagogue in Pune. Pune was part of the Bombay presidency, and the Sassoons lived there as well. This had been started by David Sassoon, but completed after his death, completed in 1867. It's known as Lal Deval. Lal is red, Deval temple, for obvious reasons. Moving on, David Sassoon is actually buried in the grounds of that synagogue, and this is his mausoleum. I'm very, very happy to have these photographs from the Bahar family of Bar Mitzvah, nowadays called the Bar Mitzvah. So when a boy is 13, he becomes a man, and he learns his prayers, and he has to wear the tefillin or phylacteries. And this is David Bahar at home, and his brother Emmanuel Bahar at the Jewish club. So bar mitzvahs were celebrated quite differently then. They were more low-key, and the emphasis was on the boy knowing his prayers and putting on the phylacteries. Other life cycle situations were the wedding. So here we have the Knesset Eliyahu Synagogue Choir in the 50s, directed by Commander Jack Japheth. Previously, there's also been a choir directed by George Sofa. So really happy to have these photographs as well. And community leaders. Above, we have Shalom Abraham, the headmaster at the Sir Jacob Sassoon School, which was in the grounds of the Magenta Synagogue in Baikala. And Shalom Abraham's brother is David Abraham, who is a famous film star. And Shalom was often at our home conferring with my father to do with matters of the school. And on the left, we have David Dangur, Menachem David Dangur, who I was happy to have been able to interview in the 1980s. And he acted as Hazan as well. And a lot of boys, I think, who grew up in the 50s and 60s remember him teaching them a lot of the songs, the hymns that we sing. One, for example, Adon Olam, is a beautiful tune. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yesir Nivra, O Lord of the world. On the right, we have community leaders welcoming Rabbi Halberstam, who was the emissary for the chief rabbi Uzziel of Israel at Santa Cruz Airport. In those days, you could actually go down to the aeroplane, which you can't do these days. So now we move on to Habonim in Bombay, which was established in 1935. This is a picture in 1938, once it had been established. So in 1935, my father, Albert Manasseh, with his very good friend, Solomon Ezra, had read about Habonim, which had started in England and also in South Africa. And they then got the handbooks and introduced it into Bombay. The idea was that the Jewish youth should not lose their religion, that they should know something about religious values. And so it was begun. And my mother early on joined the organization, and here she is, probably still about 17, and she is the secretary to the Manhig. They were not married at that time. The Manhig being the director, and she was commissioner of the girls division, and Solomon was commissioner of the boys division. On the right-hand side, you see the Habonim badges, the Bay, the letter Bay, for Bonim, which means builders. And you see the palm tree and the Star of David. And the enamel one on top was for the Madrichim, for the leaders, for people who had qualified. And the one, the gold at the bottom, is for the rank and file. And then by 1938, my father also introduced Habonim into Calcutta. Here he is with his cousin, Lady Rachel Ezra and Sir David Ezra, and the Madrichim and leaders of Calcutta Habonim. My mother edited journals for Habonim, and this is one which was for Habonim for 15 years. And she wrote there, "From small seeds, great things grow." 15 years ago, in February 35, a small group of Jewish boys and girls met with a couple of young men at the David Sassoon Library Gardens in Bombay. From this innocent beginning has grown Habonim, now established in 4 centers in India, in Bombay, Calcutta, Cochin, and Pune. I'm very fortunate really to have these pamphlets at home. Habonim Strong Builders was the song that we all sang. So I think there are a few people from Habonim here. Please do sing. And it went like this. Habonim strong builders we all have become. We who will guide us for days yet to come. We pause not for laggards, but build brick by brick a mighty foundation with shovel and pick. Kevutzot Yedurim, together we stand. Rashim Seganim, united our band. Hazak Behem, as courageous and strong. Haftath Habonim, our promise, our song. The Hebrew words Kevutzot Yedurim are the different groups. Rashim Seganim are the leaders. Hazak Behem means courageous and strong. Haftahat means our promise. That was our promise. We sang it very lustily and still do if we meet together. So my mother then produced this journal called Kol Habonim, which means the voice of Habonim. And she started this in 1938, September 1938, which was just before the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah. And this is the front cover. And the back cover advertised grand variety entertainment in aid of the Habonim. And appearing would be Mina Silas, who was a composer and musician, would be the Hudson sisters, Madame Kelby's pupils, Hazel David, who played the piano and taught singing to Habonim, and a great surprise. So my father wrote something in that journal to our Bonim and Bonoth, that is to our builders. Let them try now, as they've always tried, always with greater effort, to be worthy Jews, good citizens, loyal subjects, subordinating personal interest and to welfare of others, abstaining from violence of thought, word, and action. And he says, I very much welcome the publication of our Iton, the journal, called Habonim, and sincerely hopes that it contributes to a better and sympathetic understanding of the movement in India. And he ends, Leshana Tova Tikatabu, may you be inscribed for a good year. So here we have the review of the Grand Variety Entertainment, written by Molly Gurji in the next edition. 6 o'clock, Theodore and his band played the opening number, one of the enjoyable pieces of music composed by Mina Silas, who also conducted them. 2 budding pianists played Les Clochettes for us, then humorous Hilda Flanders, whose act was frequently interrupted by loud laughter. The appreciation of Hazel David's clear notes was evident. The Hudson sisters delighted us with their songs and jokes. Little Joan Hyam looked tinier than ever on the big stage as she toe danced daintily for us. And as for Alan David, he won all hearts when he sang Home Sweet Home. The concert was over. All around, I heard praises of the evening. It was a grand success. Habonim really was very successful, and this is a picture in 1944 on the roof, on the terrace of the building adjacent to the Knesset Aliyah Synagogue. We had lots and lots of songs that we used to sing and lots of song sheets. And the Hanukkah song sheet, the Feast of Dedication, which actually will be in a couple of days' time, it ran to 2 pages. This is the first page, which we used to sing lustily at camp because it was usually over Hanukkah. And this is the second page. When we got to Nerli, we would usually want Edwina Keaton, who was one of the younger members of our group, to sing a solo, and she would sing, Nelly, 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 Dakik, Bahanuka, Neri, Adlik. I have a small candle, and I will light the candle in Hanukkah. Some more scenes of Madrichim, the leaders. These were people who passed the various tests, and this is following the investiture ceremony, which had been at the Knesset Aliyah Synagogue. And this is again on that same terrace. And you can see the younger members on the side. On the right, 1945, is a camp in Mahabaleshwar. Victor Moses was the Rosh Machane, the leader of the camp. And we had many, many activities. And once in the camp, we would have a cooking test. We were provided with rice, we were provided with eggs and the material to make an egg curry, but we certainly weren't provided with cookers, and we had to run around finding stones that would be the right size to put our saucepans on, and then light a fire which would invariably go off, and we would have to make a curry and a rice, 2 separate dishes. That was in my day anyway, and it was very delicious. And in 1948, moving on, so there's another Habonim camp in Mahabaleshwar, this time with not only members from Bombay, but Pune as well. And on the right, we have Baikala Habonim girls group. You can see everyone dressed really well. They had navy blue skirts. The men had navy blue shorts. We had white shirts. We had the tie. And on the tie would be the badge, a gold badge if you were rank and file, or the enamel badge if you were a Madrich leader. So here's another issue of Kol Habonim, a special bar mitzvah issue in 1948. That means it was 13 years old, with different advertisements on the back cover, and one is of Sprung's chocolates. Possibly that is a chocolate stain there, I'm not really sure. And inside the pamphlet was a flashback to different pictures. In the middle, on the middle, we have the first Indian Gedudim, and proud of it. That means 2 groups. My mother, Rachel, was the head of the girls group, and Jack Japheth was the head of the boys group. On the left was when Habonim began in 1935, the group at the fort. And on the right at the bottom was Cochin Habonim, run by Sato Koda, who's sitting here. And that was in 1946. Also in that pamphlet was a campus terminology. These are just a few of them. Sheat Kima, getting up time. Darkness and silence punctuated by an occasional snore. The camp is asleep. Suddenly, the piercing sound of a whistle is heard, and the camp leaps to life. No, that's only a Madrich's dream, the leader's dream. Various farmyard calls are heard, and the camp subsides into silence again. After 5 minutes, the whistle hopefully sounds again. Again, cocks crow, dogs bark, and cats mew. There are the sounds of brief battles for blankets between Madrichim and rebellious sleepers. Then yells for candles resound through the dark, and the opera singers among us scale the top notes as they attempt to wash in icy water. I guess by our time we had electricity, so we could put on the switch, but the water was icy. And then we went out into very, very cold weather to do our PT and exercises. Inspection was irregular, twice a day, and the ramble was wonderful. There are beautiful places to go to in Matharan and in Mahabaleshwar. So now in 1950, this is moving on, Habonim 15 years, we have organized a group of 35 boys and girls to go on Aliyah, that is to emigrate shortly, and to be followed by other such groups. Regular training is being put in before they leave in the study of the Torah, Hebrew, Palestinography, etc. This was youth Aliyah, so this was the immigration into Israel of youth, youngsters. And it continues, this group will enjoy its training in a religious environment at a time when the religious youth Aliyah has hardly the means to provide for the overwhelming majority of the religious youth arriving from Aden, Yemen, and North Africa. Life was actually very difficult for those who emigrated or who immigrated into Israel. Here, for example, at Julius in the Gaza district, there's an account. The seeds for onions, potatoes, etc., which we had stored up during that terrible winter, were destroyed due to the rains and the damp. The seeds which should have been sown in the month of November were not sown until the 22nd of March. lack of food and no water at times. There were 70 families with children living in that moshav, an agricultural settlement, through the snow and rain. In the meantime, the main supply of water for which the wells had been dug was delayed owing to miscalculation, and a few pipes could not be moved again owing to breakage. There was no proper school, and then there was only one teacher who was far from sufficient. So life was very difficult. This is my Aunt Violet. She emigrated to Israel in 1949, and she addressed the Keren Haisot Youth Conference in 1950. Her speech was in Hebrew, and she said it without looking at her sheet of paper, so she did very well. And she had also been Rosh Machane, the leader of camp in Mahavleshwar, I think it was previously. Now we move on to 1950-51, and here's Habonim Camp in Mahavleshwar. The Rosh Machane, the leader of the camp, was Mrs. Kitty Sofa, who is seated here on the right. My mother is seated on the left. I'm seated next to her, and Mark Sofa is seated next to his mother. It's really a beautiful photograph. I'm sorry not to be able to give all the names. Isaac Baruch, who I mentioned singing in synagogue earlier, is over here. And I spoke to someone who'd been to the camp. He was very young at the time. That's Solomon, who we know as Solomon Zaki. And he said, those were the best times of our lives. We spent the 6 months after camp talking about it, and the next 6 months about the camp that was to come. It was like that. And here's a Habonim party at the Jewish club. We had farewell party after farewell party after farewell party. And this was a very large one. And it was a combined birthday party for Raymond Saleh, who's kneeling here in the middle. And for a family, combined birthday party and a farewell party, because she and her family, Emil and Amy and Eddie and George, would be leaving soon for Canada. Seated next to Raymond is a very good friend, Helen Manasseh, and I have to thank Helen for being such a fount of inspiration and knowledge. And whenever I have a question about who's who, I phone Helen. We wish her Me'ave Esrim Shana, and until 120. She is absolutely amazing and a razor-sharp mind. My father is sitting here, it's the manhig and the leader. My grandmother is here. Actually, myself and my mother were in Israel at the time. She had taken me there for about 9 months to be with her sister. So we are not in that photograph. This is a picture of Mikveh Yisrael. So these are some of the youth who had gone in 1951 to an agricultural school. And this is in 1953 when Henry Arnie, my mother's brother, who had been one of the leaders in Bombay, he's standing here with dark glasses, went to visit them. I hear from Ivy, who's standing here, that they were delighted to see him, but they really loved the school. And she said these were the best years of their lives. She said they got on fantastically as a group together, but they didn't get on so well with the other youth from Morocco and Tunisia. She said the others called the Indian group Hodu Jungle, like Indians from the jungle. And they called the Moroccans Morocco Sakin, Morocco knives. Again, another handbook for 20 years of Habonim, and a historical pageant shown over here, and boiler duty here, which was the bane probably of the boy's life. Had to do boiler duty every day to get hot water for our baths in camp. And many picnics, which we absolutely loved and had a fabulous time. I recently found this one on the left, 1944 Purim. And I asked Helen, who's sitting here, I could only recognize her and my Aunt Violet. And she passed with flying colors and named almost 99% of everybody sitting there. Here I am with my friends Marjorie and Nadia. You can remember us for a little bit later. These are pictures that Mark Sofa took, so he's not in the pictures. However, a great time was had by all. I see Joe over here, Joe Zilka. Remember him, and Eli Gabe, remember them as well. Remember him as well. So the camps I remember really were to Matharan. We used to go by train from Bombay to Nerul. Here it is, this sign for Nerul. And then we would go in this toy train up to Matharan, which was full of red mud and monkeys. And here are some scenes from the camps. On the right is the scene of a bicolor Habonim camp returning. They are here at Nerul Station, and they have their sticks which you needed in Matharan because it's quite hilly and long walks. And they also had their solar topis to keep them from the sun. This one was in my time. And we had come down this mountain to this village below. A photograph again by Mark Sofa. And here again, you see Eli Gabe, one of our leaders, and Joe Zilka, also one of our leaders. I think I mentioned Brian Keaton later, so here is Brian. And that's me sitting over there, and Nadia and Marjorie, who we might meet later. So we also had daily singing sessions. This is the Red House in Matharan. And Mrs. Sofa, Kitty Sofa, had asked myself and Marjorie to lead the sessions, which we did very happily, and we enjoyed the songs. I hope everyone did. Mark Sofa also kept a camp diary, which was absolutely wonderful to read, and these are just two little gems. So apart from singing and inspection and physical exercises, we also had daily baseball at the police grounds in Matharan. So Mark writes, the girls condescended to play baseball today, and I must admit, they turned in a very impressive performance. Nadia hits the hardest, Sara runs the fastest, and Marge stands the stillest. I'm sure it's not true, because I'm sure Marjorie did play. Yeah. On Friday nights, we always had a wonderful meal, and I suppose after the meal we would go for a walk sometime. This one was to Madhavji Park, and David Gabe apparently sang, Jo ko kya bolenga, inshallah wo raat mein baat nahi karenga, hello, hello, been so fair. So apparently Joe was an inveterate talker in his sleep, and David was hoping that he wouldn't keep them awake all night talking in his sleep. Joe was one of the leaders, and the hello, hello, been so fair was the chorus which we would all sing. It actually comes from an Iraqi song, Jewish one. Ya Rabbi ta'inu muradul hasanahum wi umratu. Hello, hello, it's so fair. Hello, hello, it's so fair. It got changed a little bit in his passage to India. So some scenes from Habonim Camp. These are the different groups. This is the older girls group with Marjorie, myself, and Nadia. Sorry, not to mention everyone. And Kivutsa Etzion on the left, the younger girls. I've mentioned Edwina Keaton singing Nearly, Nearly, and here she is. And these are the boys groups, the older boys on the right. Mark actually finally in a photograph. David Gubby, who sang that song. Brian Keaton, who I've mentioned before. Sorry, not to mention everyone. If you want to know who they are, please do email me, and I can let you know. Here's the younger boys. My brother sitting here, Jakob, and Gabriel Aronoff, who I think at that camp was my partner for the cookery competition. And we actually won, and so did Brian and Mark. So we were joint first prize with our delicious egg curry and rice. So we used to stay at two places in Matharan. One was called the Dell and one was called the Red House. And Mark wrote this song. I'm sorry, I know I'm running out of time, but I'm going to sing it all the way through. Please join me if you know it, and it's sung to Jamaican farewell. I'm sad to say I'm ill today, thanks to Joe and Eli Gabe. They made me sorry, they made me cry. How I'm longing for the day we say goodbye. This is by the manager of the two houses. In 56, if I remember well, Habonim asked if they could have the Dell. I said, okay, I couldn't refuse. How I wish I knew that they were Jews. For the rent they bargained, they paid me less. I said from breakages I'd squeeze the rest. Till 59 my brains I racked, when in 60 the marble table they cracked. I felt so nice, I tripled the price. At home I ordered my favorite curry and rice. Then Joe introduced me to Easy Moses. We joked a little, we had a laugh. Before I knew where I was, I'd agreed to half. In 62, they wrote to me. I lied and said no house was free. I was so happy to get rid of those jerks. I gave Red House to Raj Mahal Printing Works. Of this firm I did never hear. I wondered who these printing fellows were. I went to the station to meet the train. Harry Belafonte would say, ahoy. It was Joe and Eli Gabe again. I'm sad to say I'm ill today. Thanks to Joe and Eli Gabe. They made me sorry, they made me cry. How I'm longing for the day we say goodbye. By 1965, we put on an SS Shalom show at at the Birla Hall. My mother writes, when most had left and almost everyone still remaining in Bombay Habonim was intending to leave, an outstanding pageant was presented celebrating 30 years of Habonim, the SS Shalom show. And within the year, many of the actors on the stage moved out of dear old Bombay to other shores. Part of the Baghdadian exodus from hospitable India, Albert Manasseh and his fine young people made their way to different lands. The legacy of Habonim lived on in their lives and in their hearts. It's true. These are scenes from the younger group. It was the story of Purim, of Esther and King Ahasuerus and Mordecai. There's my brother in the middle. This was all the group at the end. And this is from the older group. Many sketches presented, written by Arnold Epstein. And this one is of a newly arrived couple making Aliyah to Israel, here being registered on arrival, here getting onto an Eged bus. And this was the final scene, all the sailors in the SS Shalom show. And on the left, Rachamim Melamed, who was the leader of the youth group Bnei Akiva in Bombay. He was a mime artist and really brilliant. And this was the party celebrating the event. There were many tributes. When my father died, and this is one of them. On the left, Albert influenced the lives not only of the Jewish boys and girls in Bombay, but also of their children. His was a life devoted to the good of the Jewish community. He was incorruptible, and people around him recognized it and admired him and respected him for it. I'll move to my mother. Mrs. Rachel Manasseh did a lot for us Bombay teenagers in my time in the 40s and 50s. She was a leader in the Habonim movement, which we looked forward to every Sunday morning and which taught us all we knew about Judaism, religion, and Israel. The highlight was once a year when we went to camp, up to the hill stations, to Matharan and also Mahabaleshwar. Mrs. Manasseh was an icon. She was one in a million and is missed terribly by us all. May her soul rest in peace. Amen. Mrs. Kitty Sofa. We will never forget the wonderful times we had with her in the various camps that she took us to. She ruled the camps with a strong but fair hand and watched over us as though we were her own family. She was aware of all the midnight feasts we had, but never tried to stop us, and never let on that she knew. We, her children, from the piglets to the madrichim, will never forget her, and her memory will always be with us. That was from the Habonim friends from North America, Australia, England, and Israel. Well, a lot of the material I've given you comes from my mother, Rachel Manasseh's book, Baghdadian Jews of Bombay. It can be ordered at Amazon.com and also at the Midrash or from its own website. It's also available, as I said, on my brother's website, midrash.org, which has many teachings and laws and interesting information about Judaism and the Iraqi traditions on his website. This is the chapter I wrote in a book, Music, Traditions in the Baghdadi Jewish Communities of Bombay and Pune, Continuity and New Horizons, that is available online. And an earlier book, which I wrote about the hymns, songs of praise in the Babylonian Jewish tradition, with a CD that goes with it. Well, it's Hanukkah in 2 days' time, so I wish everyone a happy Hanukkah, Chag Urim Sameach, the Festival of Light, Tezku Shanim Rabos, which means may you merit many years. And if there's time, very briefly, I'd like to sing one of the songs, an Iraqi song, which is the Hanukkah song. I know most of us are very familiar with Maoz Tzur, which was the most famous song, but the Iraqi song is Lord Save the Waiting Dove, the tears turn to thee. I'll sing just the first and third verses. There are 5 verses.
There is time and don't hurry. Take your time.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
We want to enjoy it.
Well, I'm coming to the end. You'll be happy to know. So this is how it goes. Ya Hassel Yona Mehaka with Mathalach Mefaka with this Mahabach Atta Malaka Bishmonat Yeme Hanukkah with this Mahabach Atta Malaka Bishmonat Yeme Hanukkah ويشيروا عمخ شيرات وزميرات ما بزيقارات بهدلي قامت النيرات بشمونات يمي حنوكا وتسمح باخت مالكا بشمونات يمي حنوكا. That is the way We used to sing it in Bombay. It may have been slightly different to the way it was in Iraq. So I wish everyone a very happy Hanukkah. And with that, I bid farewell from the Gateway of India, from Bombay, in this wonderful photograph taken by Muni Moses. And that's it. We've come to the end. Growing up in Bombay, thank you ever so much. And I'll stop the screen sharing now. Thank you. Thank you, Avner.
Great. First of all, we enjoyed it very much. And there's a lot of compliments in the chat, which I'll send you later on. And you'll be able to read them. It was amazing and makes us envy in this period of time that you spent there in India in your youth and had a lot of fun and in the Bonim. Amazing and very interesting. So thank you very much for the talk. And this is just the first talk. We'll have another one.
I'm sorry, I did actually leave out. I had to leave out a lot. Okay.
Well, so we'll have another one. It was interesting and we loved it. So that's it for today. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Happy Hanukkah. Stay safe and happy. And goodbye. Thank you.